A commercially thriving post-industrial landscape fueled by mass consumption and tourism. Birmingham remains the same, but strives to be different. Familiarity, convenience, grey-on-grey dual carriageways, and the same sticky nightclubs ripple and fade into each other until an image forms in the mind of apathy, of stagnation, of home. It had been 3 years since I had last seen Mr. Bloom, and although he still felt familiar, his appearance seemed to have changed considerably. He was clean-shaven and wore newly polished leather shoes. It was overcast, and the wind was relentless, but we sat down to roll a cigarette. Mr. Bloom liked to stay in one place when smoking, eating, or talking. He says that distracted walking is the root cause of misery in the modern world. He says that one should open up the senses to the urban landscape and find, buried beneath the spectacle, a symphonic web of texture and aroma. The largest fashion store in the world was built in Birmingham in April this year. The Primark in question occupies 160,000 square feet over 5 floors. The sprawling queues look like pilgrimage, the customers like pilgrims. I found it difficult to understand what it was that I was looking at and what it was that it meant, but Leopold Bloom stood transfixed. With the sickly sweet caress of cheap perfume on his tongue, Bloom transcended the fluorescent lights and incessant chatter, and passed into a heady daydream of flowers and warmth. The curve of a woman's neck and the chill of her skin in winter filled Bloom's senses as he travelled through each unwitting shopper with unbridled fascination. Rose gold petals drifted into view, and eroticism clenched the bone as faces turned to lips and shoulders brushed with shoulders. Here was a place where things were exchanged. The exchange of clothes for currency, the exchange of sweat for consumption, the exchange of breath for breath. Here was a place where eyes glazed over like cinnamon buns and the soul was set on fire. I persuaded Bloom to follow me into the Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery so that I could find a specific Rossetti painting located in the Pre-Raphaelite room. By the time I arrived at the Pre-Raphaelite room, I had walked a full circuit of the floor and in that time lost contact with Mr. Bloom. I searched for the Rossetti painting but didn't find it. A man who was sketching a painting and who had seen me walk around the room a few times asked if he was in my way. I said no, but that I was looking for a Rossetti painting, the one of the woman with the red hair, and did he know if it was still there. He said that most of the Pre-Raphaelite collection was on tour in America. He was softly spoken, and I think glad to have someone to talk to. As consolation, he took me to an installation which housed a grotesque sculpture of Michael Jackson. As I was leaving, I caught sight of Bloom sitting on a sofa by the Edwardian tea rooms. He was enjoying the music of cutlery and the murmur of conversation rising towards high ceilings. And he was thinking of his wife, who was still in bed, who was warm and soft and probably hungry. He would leave shortly to buy kidneys for their breakfast. As we walked down a guided path between construction sites, I looked up at the office buildings and struggled to remember if I had seen them before. I spoke to Bloom about my discomfort. I told him that I felt claustrophobic and that the buildings were too close together. He said he didn't mind. I asked him, "Don't you remember what was here before?" He replied, "Don't you see what is here now?" And with that, he said goodbye and headed to the indoor market. I made my way to Northfield, the area where I'm from, and stopped at the overpass next to Bourneville Police Station. Northfield, South Birmingham, a Labour stronghold for the most part of its existence. This month, it has become Conservative. A vote Leave majority and white working class area that's being increasingly colonised by middle class immigrant families such as my own. All the while, Bloom's advice was circling in my mind and steadily building something within me that might be described as curiosity. To open up the senses to the urban landscape and find, buried beneath the spectacle, a symphonic web of texture and aroma. To feel on one's fingertips the rough melody of cars passing by at 40 miles per hour, and to notice life within a landscape that you had assumed was barren, and to know that the buildings might change, but the familiar echoes, the tasteless air, and this particular lake will most likely remain. When you feel the city's breath on your neck, and crush the garlic clove of sensory experience to release the pungent flavour of the present tense, then that is when something happens, and that something is that nothing changes. Nothing changes between before and after, between now and then. You have lived here before many times, and it will still be here when you get back, clean shaven and wearing newly polished leather shoes. But beneath the glimmer and the flourish, the clean pavements and the new offices, it's just the same as you remember.